trying to cause a big sensation. I'm just talking about my generation.
Good afternoon, everybody. So we are going to be talking about my generation a little bit. Yeah, there's a few here. Okay, let's do that. Sorry, the millennials, we're going to talk about us, because that's the kind of generation we are. So it's a delight to be here. Thanks for hanging in. And I'm happy to be here with you talking, but we're really having a pretty incredible presentation at the end of my talk too, so we look forward to it. So mine is Confessions of a Boomer CEO, lessons on heroes, myths, and legacy. And so with no further ado, I'll start. And it starts with the first confession is, I've had a great life, and I've been lucky. And I want to talk about that because you've heard a lot of stories in the last couple of days of personal stories that are terrific and inspirational. And I consider myself really as a lucky person in so many ways. But I want to lay the foundation of why I say that. So it's going to start with, all right, here's the kid. This is the one that, I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror to shave, and he's not there. But this was me, an average kid in a little town in Oklahoma, raised by a father was a pharmacist, my mom was a nurse, and I was going to be a doctor till my first year of chemistry. I decided against that. But I had a good life, good high school, so on and so forth. When it came time for college, I was really fired up to go to Oklahoma State. And I sat down with my parents to talk about it one night and found out they had no money to send me to Oklahoma State. Like, whoa, because I'd had a nice life. I had no idea we didn't have money to do that. And so one thing I remembered is there's a guy that was a year older than me that had gotten a football scholarship into a small junior college up in Kansas. And what I remembered is he wasn't very good. I know I wasn't very good, but I was better than him. And I thought, you know what, if he can get a scholarship there, I can too, and I did. And spent 2 years in junior college, played football, great time, probably too good a time actually. And then it was Vietnam War. And during that time, I felt the call to duty. And unlike some my age, that said, okay, I don't want to go off to war, I did. And I think it was a mix of feeling a sense of duty, but it was also a sense of adventure. And it was really defining for me because I not only went off to the service, I ended up going through officer candidate school, becoming a lieutenant, ultimately a captain, and serving in Korea rather than Vietnam. Fortunate enough to, again, lucky. Some of my friends, I was a forward observer, which is, maybe many of you don't know what that is, but you're out in the trenches calling in artillery, and I had friends that didn't make it, and I was fortunate I did. But I was also lucky. I learned a lot of lessons about leadership in that experience as well. But then I entered the restaurant business. I went back to school at Oklahoma State and then entered the restaurant business. And I entered it in the early 70s, and I didn't know anything about women going back to work. I didn't know anything about increase in food away from home. I just knew it seemed like a pretty good industry that I'd started into while I was still at school, running a college-age nightclub, liked what I was doing, and thought that the career in the restaurant business served me well because in the military, what I'd done is really worked with teams of people. And I liked the leadership. I didn't know why, but I did like it. And so restaurant business, that's what it is. That's what we do in the restaurant business. It's teams of a chance to lead people in that case, small. So there was this macro event going on with women entering the workforce and increase in food away at home that I had no idea I was going to benefit of the way I did. But here's the way it worked out. Here's the industry growth. Those of you that are boomers, I don't think there's many here close to my age, but there might be a few that have ridden this wave as well. And this was the industry. We had high growth. So immediately I moved from system manager to multi-unit to being higher positions all along the way. But I was lucky. It was a period of time where if you worked hard and you were pretty good and you were diligent, you could move up because there was all this growth. And one of the things that was said yesterday by Gene, he said he wonders if younger people in our restaurant companies today, if we do enough to help them. And I think it's different because in a lot of times they're held up because there's not this kind of growth. And so the opportunities, they're still good. They're not what they were when we were there. Doesn't mean it's bad, just means it's different. So here's the industry growth cycle. And I look at it and go, man, I was lucky. They're my operating years. And our industry has matured. And we truly are in market share battle now. And I would tell you that my skill set to run a company today is probably not what was needed. I like turnarounds, I like growth, and anything different I'm not very good at. So I was fortunate enough that my skill set fit at a point in time where the industry was growing, we were moving. I had my wild ride, so some of you look and say, well, I couldn't keep a job. Well, truth is, I never got fired. But I did work at a lot of different companies, and probably the highlights for me would be I did the acquisition of Applebee's, one of his 2 restaurants. Was president up to 50 restaurants, and I hired Roz Mallet. So, and then Fridays, I went to Fridays in 1989. We had 135 restaurants. We just opened up in the UK, 2 countries, and 13 and a half years later, we had almost 800 restaurants in 55 countries around the world. We'd gone from 400 million to over 2 billion. That was a hell of a ride. It was fun. But I also knew when it was time for me to leave. I just sensed I was not the right guy to stay there at that time. So I also have had the fortune of being on boards, starting with the Restaurant Association, which has really helped me in many ways. And it was the National Restaurant Association and the Ed Foundation. I was actually chair in the Ed Foundation because of my passion about education. Share Our Strength, which you'll hear more about and you've heard a lot about. Longhorn, this is the wrong logo because it was the old ugly logo that was done on a cocktail napkin George and I were working with. The original one, I was original investor with George. Caribou and Famous Days, I'm still on that board. And then technology, and technology was kind of the hard way. I made an investment, Johnny and I made an investment thinking, okay, well this is, technology's coming. It was a ESP, which was similar to Xeos. We just weren't far along. And got a lot more experience than I'd planned for the investment we made. So along the way, something that in thinking about this is, and listening to some of the things talked about the last couple days, there was always this sense in all this growth and everything was going on that there was a lot of noise about the skies falling. And if you look back over this course of time, minimum wage. When I started at Steak and Ale in 1972, there was no minimum wage. The waiters actually paid money. This is what tip pooling used to be, to own their station. And they had a 5-table station. Judd was one of them, by the way. Sarah's husband worked with me. And they would clean and set up their station and close down their station. And for that, they would give up a certain amount of money to tip the rest of the house. And that was the deal. There was no minimum wage. And so when minimum wage started to become an issue, the sky's falling, we're going to go out of business, and guess what? We didn't go out of business. But there's a lot of things here you look at and you go, wow, you know what? We've made adjustments, we continue to make adjustments, but they were scary at the time, and there's things still today. So that brought me back to share with you some lessons, and I thought about, all right, first of all, just look beyond the noise. I mean, we hear today still, I mean, there's so much going on in the industry. There's so many threats, quote, to our business. And I'm not minimizing, I'm not saying they're not real. But I'm talking about it in a sense, as leaders, you have to rise above the noise. And so I'm going to share with you just a few lessons I've learned along the way. But starting with this one, and it's caring. So you may say, well, of course everybody cares. Well, I'm a boomer. I care about me. That's the way I grew up, right? I didn't really care about you when I was growing up. I cared about me. And that may sound strange to some of you that aren't. But here's what I was guided by as a young man. I'm sorry. Caring, clarity, and courage are the 3 points. And now I'm going to move to what caring. Here's what I was guided by. Anybody remember Vince Lombardi? He was most winning NFL coach when I was a kid. I was a Green Bay Packer fan because Oklahoma, you had no team. They still have no team. So, but this was the deal. That winning is the only thing. And that competitive mindset drove me in everything I was doing. And so as a leader, that's the way I thought about it. My job is to win. And it doesn't matter at what cost. I've got to win. So what changed that? Well, so familiar one, many of you know Norm Brinker. I've heard the stories before. My story about Norm, I have many of them, but this particular one. So I'm a multi-unit, with steak and ale. I've advanced pretty quickly and fortunate enough to be, in quote, a senior team at that time. The company was still fairly small, and we were all of us had been tested by Lewis to be competitive. We're Beatrice Holwig, we were all tested, we were all competitive as hell, and we were doing well. And so Norman invited us up to Aspen, Colorado for a retreat. We'd never been outside Dallas, Texas. We thought that was pretty cool. It was summertime, we're going to Aspen, this is going to be really cool. And so we go, we show up, and there's no agenda, which we thought was a little strange. We show up, we have cocktails, we drink like hell, have, fun, kidding around with each other. And then like macho guys we went out in the woods and took a 5-mile run to see who could outrun each other after you drank, all night. And we were that crazy, and that's what we did. Got up the next morning, though, and the world changed. And the world changed because Norman introduced us to this man. And you heard him mentioned earlier today. Who knows who this is? Stephen Covey. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Individual, and this highly effective executive. And nobody knew who Stephen Covey was at that point. This is 1975. And Norman had decided that all of the strength we had about the way we competed was starting to work against us. That in fact, we need to think about how we work together in a different way. And this idea about I win at your cost, you lose, I win, you lose. This man took 2.5 hours and literally changed my life. Literally changed my life, because all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute. Relationships are about we both win? Vince Lombardi would not like that. He didn't agree. But in business and in life and relationships, all of a sudden, it made me a different person. And there's many other things about what Stephen Covey talked about. I won't take the time, but that was a momentous change for me in the way I think about my relationships, whether personal or business. And so shaking me up to make me think differently was the first thing that had to happen, and to actually truly, genuinely care about something other than me, which is strange for boomers to do in that age. Next is clarity. This took a little longer because I was driven by this point. I can do anything. I'm a baby boomer, right? I've grown up to believe I could do anything. I work hard. I can outwork the next person. I can outsmart the next person. I can do anything. And along the way, you find out, well, maybe you can't. And so one of the ways that came home to me, and it took a while, I learned a little bit along the way, but I was reminded of it in a very valuable lesson. And that was 2 years ago in Ethiopia. And I have some of my travel friends here. Amanda and Jim are here. Kat is not. Jeff is here, and Joni. And we were invited to go with Jeff Powers, who's Pangeo Coffee, who works for Global Hope Network International. They do work in the poorest villages around the world. And their idea is to go into those villages and help them help themselves. And so we thought, okay, this will be interesting. Let's go take a look at it. So we go, we arrive. Jeff takes us into this village called Garmon. He tells us going in that, the number one priority they have is that their water. They need help with water. So we go, okay, fine, we're going to go. So this is the meeting in this building, and this is these are the elder people, the people we're meeting with. How old do you think the oldest is? Probably 38, 39, because they don't live that long in that village. So we go in, there's 2 or 3 languages going on at one time, and they proceed to tell us that water is the most important for them. They have a water project. They need to put a pump in a river or next to the river that's going to bring water up over a hill and so on and so forth. And we listen. So being the boomer CEO I am, okay, well, that's fine. That's priority 1. Let's go the rest of the list here. I said, what's priority 2 or 3? And they, like that quick, they came back and said, priority 2 and 3 is priority 1, water. Now that's clarity. And let me show you why it became clear to us. That's the source of water. It became very clear to us that that was the number 1 priority. So how many times in life and how many times in business do we get that kind of clarity? But yet it's so powerful because we were able to organize around that. And I can't tell you how proud I am to tell you this, but I'm going to show you the outcome of it. So that was July 2012. The project took longer because Global Hope will not cooperate to pay people off. It took longer. We got blocked by some of the government. We finally got through, got the project done. We raised $50,000. And look at this. This picture came 3 days ago from Jeff. So obviously, this clarity and the importance of this project, really brings it home. But it's our lives. It's how many times can we find that kind of clarity in what we're doing? So the next is courage. Okay, I was a captain in the Army and all that stuff, and I thought I was kind of courageous. But along the way with all that stuff that was going on I showed you, I wasn't always courageous. I would step out. I remember one NRA meeting, I don't remember what the issue was, and all the chain guys were against this. And when I first joined the NRA, you had the independents and the chains. The independents didn't trust the chains, and the chains, there weren't many of us in the room. And whatever the issue was, they said, all right, everybody that's for this, go over here, and everybody for that. So I walk over and I look around, I'm with the independent guys. I go, oh, wait a minute, I'm in the wrong place. So the point I'm trying to make is that there were times along the way, and I'm going to bet everybody in this room can relate to this, that I could have been more courageous. I could have stepped out more. And it took time to really get that kind of courage. So I'm going to start with this one, because we've talked about this today, and I'm really not going to beat this long. But I had this already teed up before the discussions here today, is I was brought up that all that counts is you make money, and the rest of it's fluff. And I will tell you, as a white boomer CEO, I still sit around at tables with people that think this way. And it takes courage to break it. Whether you're a CEO, a board member, a manager, a leader, it takes courage to lead through this. Because this whole idea of conscious capitalism, it is not going to go away. because the fundamental needs that have already been expressed are there in terms of how to connect with the employees and how to connect with your guest or your consumer. And I'm not going to walk through this, but Kip, we talked about, his stock doubled the first day, by the way. Johnny happened to see him in a restaurant the night before he went out on his road show. And so Container Store, they go out. Now all the financial guys are writing them up going, oh, their overhead's too high. He's got to change that. And he says, I'm not going to change it. And his stock doubled, when he went out. But that takes courage. The same thing in Whole Foods, takes courage. Motley Fools, they're following people based on this. Leonard Green and Partners, private equity guys talking about conscious capitalism. They're a minority. There are not many that talk that way. So for us to really advance this, and if you believe it, it's going to take courage. And I want to tell you, I have the courage to stand up and talk to you about it, and I have the courage to try to advance it, because I believe it's the only way we're really going to be successful. When we talk about, and Johnny touched on it again, worker activism, all the stuff we're dealing with, all this noise, we've got to get credit for the things we do well, and we've got to think about how we do well in a broader context, which is the stakeholder model. And then, along that model, here's two crazy ones in our industry. Steve Ells, what a crazy guy. He's like George McCarroll. He's crazy. He thinks, sustainability and quality of product and source of product is important. And by the way, the first time I heard about that source of product could be a differentiator was in the early 90s in Japan. They've been talking about it a long time. So is it hard? Yes. Is it going to require a different way of thinking? Yes. I met with some guys that have some fast casual restaurants on the East Coast, and you listen to these guys, and they're millennials, and they're passionate about what they're doing and feeding people healthy food, and they say they're going to make the supply chain work for them. We'll see. But it takes that kind of courage. And then Ron Shake. How many of you know Ron? All right, a few of us know him. Ron's not the most warm, fuzzy guy, right? I mean, we can talk among ourselves. Ron can be abrasive, egotistical. I didn't like him for a long time. I've always admired his results and his phenomenal results. What I do admire about this man today is he has courage to stand up. He's doing the cafes where people can name their own price. He wants people to have dignity about coming, that can't afford food, can't afford to eat in a restaurant always, but need to eat, to have the dignity to name their own price. He spent a week on food stamps. A week on food stamps, just to know what it was really like. So he could stand up and say with conviction that he believes this is right, that we have to lift people up and help them. So that's the kind of courage I'm talking about. That's the kind of courage I aspire to have, and I would encourage all of us to think about ourselves. So is the sky still falling? Yeah, it is. Still is. We talked about a lot of it over the last couple of days. There's still all this stuff going on. But I want to challenge you not to ignore it, not be involved. I think you should be involved with the industry and other companies in terms of solving these things, but don't let it weigh you down. Don't let it stop you. So many times we thought, this is going to end the business and we're never going to return, and guess what? We've made it through. And you make it through because you think beyond the noise again. And in this case, I asked the question at this stage of my life, my career, is that all there is? Just to be above the noise? Is that it? And then I came to this thought to share with you today, legacy. All right, I'm an old guy up here. And I'm okay with that. I really am. I've had a good life. I'm lucky. Each of you, depending on different places in your life and your career. And I want to ask you just to ride with me for a couple minutes on your legacy. So we're going to start with caring, going back to that first point, caring. What do you really care about? That's going to answer the question, what is my why? And I learned this in Conscious Cap. The question that we had to define on a business sense is, why does my company exist? And if you haven't been through that in your company, you need to do it. It is a very, very hard thing to do, is to define it. But it's also equally as hard to do personally. So to ask yourself the question, why do I exist? I'll tell you, as I've thought it through, for me, it's pretty easy at this stage of life. I'm fortunate enough that I've come to the answer that I exist in life to help others. That sounds, nice, but I really believe it. And more, I've found that when I talk to people and I end up a conversation or an email, I try to always pose this question, how can I help you? And if I do that for you, I'm sincere about it. It's not just trite. It's like Amanda always does authentically because she is authentic. And so for me, this is what I'm about. But I had to come back to this clarity thing. So I can't do everything. So help others, what does that mean? I mean, we don't have enough money. Bill Gates doesn't have enough money to solve everything, and he's trying. God bless him. So I thought about that, and I came back to this idea that I noticed, several years ago and doing my work in the NRA was we had really good at defining what we were against, but we hadn't defined what we were for. And I would challenge all of us to think about that. Think about it from a business perspective and think about it more importantly from a personal perspective. What am I for? Because it's easy to get what you're against. It's what you're for. And that clarity of what I'm for. So for me, and God bless me, I have a partner that shares this. For me, I'm for ending childhood hunger, and I'm for education. Because I believe that'll solve. Thank you. I really believe in our society, and in the United States specifically, we're faced with dilemma. We got haves and have-nots. We've got an emerging, or a middle class that's shrinking. And the answer to those problems are really found in education, and education can't be done well unless kids are fed. So that's what I'm for. So the last thing is, I'm a 60s guy, right? Grew up in the 60s. So what's my movement? And what do I have a courage to really stand up for and believe in? Because that's the way I grew up. There were movements around me. Whether it was the civil rights movement, or whether it was the anti-war movement, whether it was the Beatles, whether it was fashion, doesn't matter what it was, there was all these movements going on as I'm growing up and trying to figure what am I part of, what do I believe in, and how am I going to adapt to it. And so I really am thinking about that more and more, and obviously Share Our Strength is a movement, City Year, what they do to help in education. So those are some of the movements that I have a passion for. But I want to give you a context for you to develop yours if you don't have it. So first of all, it starts with everybody's doing well here. Everybody in this room is doing well, right? Does anybody feel like they're not doing well? Food on the table, roof over your head, kids, grandkids, whatever it might be, we're pretty fortunate. And so we live in this world where it's pretty comfortable, right? So what I've tried to do is move to the discomfort zone, because that's where the magic happens. That's where my head starts to think about things differently. And that's where your head thinks about things differently. And how do you make the time? We talked about headspace yesterday. I think Gene talked about that. Where do you get the headspace? No, it was Wendy. Talked about where's the headspace? And this is what I've been on a journey the past 2 or 3 years to try to find. Because one of the facts for me, I'm going to be one of those boomers that never retires. I have no interest in retirement. I love what I do. And I'm on these movements. And I can affect the movements I'm passionate about from this stage and from what we do. So in thinking that through, I had some opportunity to get uncomfortable, and I wanted to share with you quickly some of the mentors in that journey. And the first one here is 4 years ago, and I did it for 2 years. I went to Honduras. Our church in Maryland supports an orphanage and a school. And these kids you see, they're street kids. They literally have no parents they know of, or their parents abandoned them. They're found begging on the street for food or anything they can do. Imagine being that age, and that's your world. And then they're the lucky ones. They got brought in to this school and this orphanage, and they're getting meals, and they're getting education. And the goal of this organization is to really take these kids that have nothing and make them the emerging middle class of Honduras. I just love the noble cause of that. It's the middle class of Honduras they're training these kids for. But my aha with this was one of these, this is not the picture of the young man I did this with, but you go, you spend time, we did work, but they say the most important thing is the playground. Spend time in the playground with the kids. So I go, and I'm there the first day, and I'm standing around feeling uncomfortable, there's got kids playing, and the rest of the team, by the way, they're all younger than me, including I've taken twice grandkids on this so they could understand what discomfort was like and understand how good their world is. And it worked in both cases. So I'm standing around, and all of a sudden I get some kid pulling on my arm, and I look around, and he holds out his hand with marbles. And he says, "You play marbles?" When's the last time any of you played marbles? I can tell you, I hadn't played marbles forever. And some of you heard me tell the story about this. So I go, okay, I'll go try to play, because I'm not very good at soccer, so I'll try to play marbles. And I go over, and he's got a dirt ring. He's used his finger circle, and he's shooting marbles, and I'm, trying to shoot marbles, and not get dirty, And finally, he's kicking my butt. I can't keep up with him. And finally, I decide, you know what? I'm just going to lay down in the dirt and play marbles with him. And I did. And sure enough, I came back, and he respected me because I could hold my own with marbles. But the true story is we played together during the week for basketball and soccer and all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the week, the punchline of the trip you spend is at the last day before you leave, all the kids come out, they form a circle, they do a little entertainment, they thank you for being there and so on. And then each child comes and gives you a hug. And one of the most moving things that happened to me. But the most moving thing was, here came my little marble friend. And he comes around and he gives me this hug. And I'm a little emotional about it because he's such a good kid. And then he does something really unexpected. He takes my hand and hands me 2 marbles. Gives me the marbles. And my immediate reaction was, I can't take his marbles. This is his asset. This is what he has. This is his life. This is his fun. This is what he has. And I said, I can't take your marbles. He closed my hand and put it to my heart and said, I love you. I still carry the marbles around. I learned from that young man the very valuable gift that I want to share with you, that no matter how much you give, how much you care, there's always room for more. That's what he taught me. I talked to you already about Ethiopia, so I won't belabor that other than to say that it was a discomfort as well. How many of you have been to Africa? Okay, a few of you have been. And I've traveled the world, but I've never been to Africa. And people would tell you it's different. And you go, oh yeah, sure, it's different. You know, Des Moines is different, right? No, Africa's different. And what the getting around was difficult. We were actually up in northeast Ethiopia, which is close to Somalia. Jeff would drive us through a village that was Al-Qaeda, said don't take pictures while you're going through this. There was a lot of discomfort, but the greatest comfort, or the greatest learning out of that, was that we really could make a difference. And so we did the things I've already told you about, but the little story I want to leave you with on that trip was when we finally, after 8 days, I think 7 days, we ended up at the Sheraton in the capital city, Addis. Beautiful. Man, it's nice. We've been, in a village that was nice, but, it was a little rugged. And we're in this nice hotel, and we're having this wonderful meal, and we're enjoying an alcoholic beverage. And all of a sudden, I think Kat was the first said, I feel so bad doing this. And Jeff's response was interesting. Jeff said, don't. He said, you can't feel bad. You can't feel bad, because if you don't feel the good, you don't really care about the bad. You've got to feel both ends of it. You got to feel what really hurts, and you got to feel what really feels good. And be happy and proud that you live well and that you've helped others. And take that emotion and don't dismiss it. And that was a great learning for me. This picture, the young man in the gray t-shirt, it's our grandson. He's 22 years old now. Joni is not the biological mother, if you're wondering. She's much younger than I am. So James' passion in life is sustainable food and teaching kids about sustainable food. So here's this young millennial and this old boomer, and we now have emerged, we're both in the food business. But we're very worlds apart in terms of what that means. Because he is the true millennial. He doesn't care about making money. He is a social entrepreneur. By the way, he doesn't want to work for anybody either. So it all works out for him. But I'm so proud of what he's done is he took his craft that he learned and he went to small schools in Oklahoma that were the poorest in Tulsa, and he went to them and said, could I work with your students to do a community garden and teach them about nutritious food? And when I asked him, what does he really like to do, when he talks about teaching the kids about food, his face lights up like unbelievable. So he's moved on to do about 7 schools. He's now becoming known in the city so much about how to conserve water and use water in interesting ways that the city has hired him to help them understand how to do water conservation. He's got a park that he's doing, a sustainable park in another city. The punchline is that he is out to change the world. And I laugh and I go, man, I have created plenty of work for you to do for your life, because I've built restaurants around the world and done things that are going to take a little undoing. And I don't say it apologetically to him, but I say it matter of fact that I respect what he wants to do. And so the learning about this is the courage to understand something different. And that led me to this experience with him. I took him to Costa Rica last summer because there's a ranch, Rancho Margot, if you look at it. It's an eco village in Costa Rica. Beautiful. 400 acres, tucked up in the enchanted children's rainforest. The people you see are the volunteers that make this work. And those volunteers, what they do is they go in and work a minimum of 30 days. They get their food and their shelter, no pay, and they go do farm work all day long. And then they have meals together. So James, being into sustainable farming, actually became a little bit of a leader for the group while we were there. So I eat with them 3 meals a day for about a week. And they would say, "Wally, what are you doing here?" And I go, "I'm here to unlearn so I can learn." Now, what I want to share with you, if you have not spent a week with millennials, you're missing an opportunity. Because that week, my head was so full of listening to them about how they view the world and how they see the world. And again, I'm not going to apologize for my life. I know I've been lucky and it's been good. And I think I've done a lot of good things, but they see it differently and they're going to change the world. And the more I listen to them, the more I go, you know what, you go guys, we need you. We need you to do it. The final point here on this one was, here's the man that started that. He's been in the food business too. He ran international for Burger King years ago. Chemical engineer by training, master's in business, ran Burger King Europe many years ago when it was thriving, and has a chemical engineering degree, so he set up a chemical business that was non-toxic, to detoxify chemicals, and then sold it. Moved to Costa Rica to retire. Life's good, right? Sat on the beach and said, there's got to be more than this. Got to be more than this. And so he had studied, and he'd been studying all along about sustainability. And so he buys this land, and he sets out with this vision, that I'm going to create 400 acres of a sustainable ecosystem that is going to be a classroom for children around the world to learn about sustainability. And that it'll be a catalyst for people to learn and go back and do things in their community. And I watched day after day, busloads of kids coming in, learn about what they were doing. It's phenomenal what he's done. So I looked at him and I said, you know what? There's a man with a legacy. There's a man that's built something. So great admiration, and I'm going to go down and spend some more time with him, because I learned in each of these experiences has been very uncomfortable for me to unthink how I think and try to learn in different ways and think about the world in different ways, not just, I know what I'm doing, it's my way. This has really been a challenge for me, and it is for all of us. I mean, I'm sure you have the same thing. There's times where you really believe you know something, and then all of a sudden somebody challenges the way you think. And these younger people are great to do that. So to wrap it up here, I've had a great life. As I mentioned, I've been lucky. Here's the guy. I would say the girls have gotten cuter. This is my granddaughter, Sophia. And when I look in the morning in the mirror, I don't see the guy on the right. I see the guy on the left. But in my heart and in my head, the guy on the right's still there. There in terms of a curiosity, and now armed with some wisdom to be able to truly make a difference in life. So this is not about me, this is about you. And by the way, Charlie stole my slide. I had this already, and Charlie used this yesterday. So I want to end this with this thought, that your legacy, hopefully a few things I've shared with you will just make you think a little bit about it. Because legacy is not about, trying to, write it down and then hopefully read it a few years. It's about how you live your life. And I'd like to ask you to think about it in terms of, what do you care about? What's my why? Can you define that? I'd like you to think about it in terms of the clarity of, what am I for? We all know the things we're against, but what are you passionately for? And what movements do you have the courage to lead? Because we live in a society, we live in a country, it's one of the greatest countries in the world, the greatest opportunities, and all of us have been lucky to take advantage of it. We also live in a country that there's a great need for leadership. And there's leadership people that care, that have the clarity, and will take whatever their passion is to their movements to make a real difference in others' lives, whether it's your community, whether it's your business, whether it's your family, whatever it is, it's needed. Leadership is needed more than ever. Bring people together, make things happen, be passionate about what you do. Thank you.